Part 1. Introduction, Setting the Scene. Nestled in the heart of a quiet suburban neighborhood, the quaint houses stood as a testament to the lives they sheltered. The streets, lined with meticulously trimmed hedges and blooming flower beds, echoed with the laughter of children and the hum of everyday life. Among these houses was the home of John and Mary, a couple married for over a decade, their lives seemingly perfect to the outside world. John was a successful architect, known for his charm and charisma. With his neatly combed hair and sharp, tailored suits, he exuded confidence and reliability. His colleagues admired his creativity and dedication, often seeking his input on challenging projects. John's warmth and approachable nature made him a beloved figure in both his professional and personal circles. Mary, on the other hand, was a dedicated teacher at the local elementary school. Her passion for education was evident in the way she interacted with her students, always patient and encouraging. She had a knack for making learning fun, and her classroom was a vibrant, engaging place where children thrived. Her colleagues respected her, parents trusted her, and students adored her. Mary's nurturing spirit extended beyond the classroom as she was actively involved in community events and charity work. Together, John and Mary painted a picture of domestic bliss, a seemingly unshakable union. Their home was a reflection of their harmonious life, tastefully decorated with personal touches that spoke of their shared journey. Family photos lined the walls, each frame capturing moments of joy and togetherness. The garden, meticulously cared for by Mary, was a burst of color and life, much like the couple's relationship. They hosted regular gatherings where laughter and good food flowed freely, further cementing their reputation as the perfect couple. Friends and neighbors admired their bond, often commenting on how lucky they were to have found each other. John and Mary's life was a tapestry of love, respect, and shared dreams, a seemingly perfect blend of two souls destined to be together. However, beneath the surface of this idyllic existence, there were subtle cracks, invisible to the outside world. The pressures of daily life, the pursuit of professional success, and the relentless march of time had started to take their toll. These were the cracks that neither John nor Mary fully acknowledged, yet they were there, slowly widening, threatening the foundation of their perfect life. And it was into this seemingly perfect world that Lisa moved, bringing with her an air of change that neither John nor Mary could foresee. Part 2. The affair begins. Lisa moves in the tranquility of the neighborhood was disrupted one sunny afternoon when a moving truck pulled up to the house next to John and Mary's. Lisa, a vivacious woman in her early 30s, had just moved in. Fresh from a recent divorce, she was looking to start anew. Her bright smile and friendly demeanor quickly made her a subject of curiosity among the neighbors. Lisa's arrival brought a buzz of activity to the usually quiet street. Boxes were unloaded, furniture was maneuvered through doorways, and the sounds of setting up a new home filled the air. She greeted everyone she met with a warm smile and a friendly wave, making an immediate positive impression. Despite her friendly demeanor, there was an air of vulnerability about her, a hint of the emotional scars from her recent past. One morning, as Lisa struggled with a particularly heavy box, she spotted John leaving his house. Desperate for help, she called out, "Excuse me, could you lend me a hand with this?" John, ever the gentleman, walked over with a smile. "Of course, happy to help. I'm John, by the way." "I'm Lisa," she replied, grateful for the assistance. "I just moved in and didn't realize how much stuff I have." John chuckled as he lifted the box effortlessly. "It always seems like less until you have to move it." Welcome to the neighborhood, Lisa. Thank you, John. It's nice to meet a friendly face, Lisa said, her smile genuine. Growing closer. Over the next few weeks, John and Lisa's paths crossed frequently. Whether it was helping her assemble furniture or offering advice on the best local spots, John became a constant presence in Lisa's life. He found himself looking forward to their interactions, enjoying the easy camaraderie they shared. Their conversations flowed naturally, filled with shared interests and mutual respect. Lisa, still adjusting to her new life, found comfort in John's steady presence. He was kind and attentive, always willing to lend a hand or offer a listening ear. She admired his knowledge of architecture and design, and they often found themselves lost in discussions about various projects and ideas. One evening, after helping Lisa fix a leaky faucet, they sat on her porch, sharing a bottle of wine. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the neighborhood. Their laughter echoed in the twilight, a sound that, if heard, might have raised suspicions. As they settled into the wicker chairs on Lisa's porch, the sky was painted with hues of pink and orange. The bottle of wine sat between them, and John poured 2 glasses, the liquid catching the last rays of sunlight. Lisa sighed contentedly, leaning back and looking at the horizon. "Thank you again for all your help, John," Lisa said, her eyes twinkling in the fading light. "I don't know what I would have done without you." "It's been my pleasure, Lisa. You've made my evenings a lot more interesting," John replied, smiling. They clinked glasses, and as they sipped their wine, the conversation flowed effortlessly. They spoke about everything, from their favorite movies to their childhood memories. Lisa shared stories of her past, her dreams for the future, and John listened, feeling a connection he hadn't felt in years. "You know," Lisa said, her voice soft, "moving here was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made. I felt so lost after the divorce, like I didn't know who I was anymore." John reached out, placing a reassuring hand on hers. "It's never easy starting over, but you're doing great, and you're not alone here." Their eyes met, and in that moment, the line between friendship and something more began to blur. The air grew thick with unspoken emotions, and John felt a pang of guilt, quickly overshadowed by a rush of desire. "You've been such a good friend, John," Lisa whispered, her gaze lingering on his. John's heart raced. "I feel the same way about you, Lisa." As the stars appeared, the intimacy of the moment deepened. The gentle hum of the neighborhood faded into the background, leaving just the two of them in their little world. They continued to talk, their voices low and intimate, sharing their hopes, fears, and everything in between. At some point, the conversation drifted to their shared love for architecture. John found himself leaning in closer, captivated by Lisa's passion. She described her dream house, gesturing animatedly, and John could see the light in her eyes. He realized that he hadn't felt this alive in a long time. Lisa paused, her hand still mid-gesture, and looked at John with a soft, vulnerable expression. "It's nice to dream, isn't it?" "Yeah," John said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It really is." Their faces were inches apart, and the world seemed to hold its breath. John could feel the warmth of Lisa's skin, smell the faint scent of her perfume mixed with the wine. The pull between them was undeniable, a magnetic force that neither could resist. "John," Lisa murmured, her voice trembling slightly. "Lisa," he replied, his hand reaching up to gently caress her cheek. And then, without thinking, they closed the distance between them. The first kiss was tentative, a soft brush of lips that sent a jolt through both of them. They pulled back, eyes wide, the reality of what they had done sinking in. But the desire was too strong to deny. They kissed again, more urgently this time, all their pent-up emotions spilling over. The porch faded away, and it was just them, lost in the intensity of the moment. They spent hours on that porch, wrapped in each other's arms, the wine long forgotten. The world outside continued its quiet existence, unaware of the seismic shift happening within the confines of Lisa's house. By the time John finally left, the first light of dawn was breaking over the horizon. He walked home in a daze, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. He knew that he had crossed a line, that there was no going back. But in that moment, all he could think about was Lisa and the undeniable connection they shared. The secret affair. The affair blossomed in the shadows, a secret they both guarded fiercely. They met in hidden places, their stolen moments filled with passion and intensity. Every glance, every touch was charged with a sense of urgency, as if they were trying to capture as much as they could before their fragile bubble burst. John found himself torn between guilt and desire. He would lie awake at night, Mary sleeping peacefully beside him, and replay the events in his mind. He hated the deceit, the lies he had to tell to cover his tracks. But when he was with Lisa, everything else faded away. She made him feel alive in a way he hadn't felt in years, and he couldn't bring himself to give that up. Lisa, unaware of the full extent of John's marital happiness, fell deeper into the relationship. She clung to the moments they shared, convincing herself that their love was real and pure, despite the circumstances. She didn't know about the little gestures of love and commitment that John shared with Mary, the quiet moments of intimacy that defined their marriage. Their affair was a delicate dance of secrecy and longing. They would exchange brief, coded messages during the day, planning their next rendezvous. Every time they met, it was a mix of joy and fear, knowing that discovery would mean the end of everything they had built together. Despite the risks, neither John nor Lisa could bring themselves to end it. They were drawn to each other like moths to a flame, unable to resist the pull of their forbidden love. And so, the affair continued, a dark secret that threatened to unravel the lives of everyone involved. Part 3. The affair crossing the line. It was a rainy night when their relationship crossed the line. The sky was a swirling mass of dark clouds, and the wind howled through the trees, bending their branches with relentless force. Rain lashed against the windows of the neighborhood houses, creating a rhythmic drumming that added to the eerie atmosphere. John had just returned home from work, his clothes damp from the short walk from his car to the front door. He shrugged off his coat and hung it by the entrance, listening to the rain's relentless assault on their roof. Meanwhile, Lisa sat alone in her living room, the dim light from a few candles casting flickering shadows on the walls. The storm had knocked out the power, plunging her house into darkness. She tried to distract herself by reading a book, but the storm's intensity made her feel increasingly anxious. Every crash of thunder made her jump, and she couldn't shake the feeling of vulnerability that settled over her. Desperate for some company and reassurance, Lisa picked up her phone and dialed John's number. He answered on the second ring. "John, I'm sorry to bother you, but the power's out and I'm feeling a bit scared. Could you maybe come over for a little while?" John hesitated for a moment, glancing at Mary, who was engrossed in a TV show in the other room. He felt a pang of guilt, but quickly pushed it aside. "Of course, Lisa. I'll be there in a few minutes." He grabbed a flashlight and an umbrella, and after telling Mary he was going to check on a neighbor, he stepped back into the storm. The wind whipped around him, and the rain soaked through his clothes despite the umbrella. He hurried to Lisa's house, feeling a strange mix of anticipation and dread. When Lisa opened the door, her face lit up with relief. "Thank you for coming, John," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Don't mention it," he replied, stepping inside and shaking off the rain. "Let's see if we can get some more light in here." They found a few more candles and placed them around the room, the soft glow creating a cozy, intimate atmosphere. Lisa offered him a towel to dry off, and they sat on the couch, listening to the storm rage outside. For a while, they talked about mundane things, the weather, work, neighborhood gossip. But as the minutes passed, the conversation grew more personal. Lisa opened up about her feelings of loneliness and fear since her divorce, and John found himself sharing his own frustrations and insecurities. "I just feel so disconnected sometimes," Lisa admitted, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Like I'm adrift in this new life, and I don't know how to find solid ground." John reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "You're not alone, Lisa. You've got me, and I'm here for you." Their eyes locked, and in that moment, something shifted between them. The air grew thick with unspoken desire, and before they knew it, they were leaning towards each other, their faces inches apart. The first kiss was tentative, almost hesitant, but it quickly deepened as their need for each other overwhelmed any lingering doubts. They spent the night together, wrapped in each other's arms, the storm outside a mere backdrop to the tempest of emotions within. When morning came, they both knew that they had crossed a boundary that could never be undone. The secret affair. The affair blossomed in the shadows, a secret they both guarded fiercely. They met in hidden places, their stolen moments filled with passion and intensity. Every glance, every touch was charged with a sense of urgency, as if they were trying to capture as much as they could before their fragile bubble burst. John found himself torn between guilt and desire. He would lie awake at night, Mary sleeping peacefully beside him, and replay the events in his mind. He hated the deceit, the lies he had to tell to cover his tracks. But when he was with Lisa, everything else faded away. She made him feel alive in a way he hadn't felt in years, and he couldn't bring himself to give that up. Lisa, unaware of the full extent of John's marital happiness, fell deeper into the relationship. She clung to the moments they shared, convincing herself that their love was real and pure, despite the circumstances. She didn't know about the little gestures of love and commitment that John shared with Mary, the quiet moments of intimacy that defined their marriage. Their affair was a delicate dance of secrecy and longing. They would exchange brief, coded messages during the day, planning their next rendezvous. Every time they met, it was a mix of joy and fear, knowing that discovery would mean the end of everything they had built together. Despite the risks, neither John nor Lisa could bring themselves to end it. They were drawn to each other like moths to a flame, unable to resist the pull of their forbidden love. And so, the affair continued, a dark secret that threatened to unravel the lives of everyone involved. Part 4. Discovery and Confession. John's guilt months passed, and the weight of John's secret began to take its toll. His once bright demeanor dulled, and he found himself increasingly distant from Mary. The guilt gnawed at him, eating away the facade of normalcy he tried to maintain. He became more irritable, his patience wearing thin with every passing day. His work suffered, and his interactions with Mary became strained, filled with awkward silences and forced conversations. At night, John would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events in his mind. The thrill of the affair had long since been replaced by a suffocating sense of dread. He knew that he was living a lie, and the deceit was becoming unbearable. Every time he looked at Mary, he saw the trust he had betrayed, and it made him feel sick to his core. One evening, unable to bear it any longer, John decided it was time to come clean. The decision wasn't easy, but he knew that continuing to live this way would destroy him. He rehearsed his confession over and over in his mind, but the words never seemed adequate. Mary was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, when John approached her. He watched her for a moment, his heart heavy with the weight of what he was about to say. Finally, he took a deep breath and spoke. "Mary, there's something I need to tell you," he began, his voice trembling. Mary looked up from chopping vegetables, concern etched on her face. "What is it, John?" John's hands were shaking. He took a seat at the kitchen table, unable to meet her eyes. "I've been having an affair," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. Mary's reaction. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the soft hum of the refrigerator. Mary stood frozen, the knife still in her hand, her mind struggling to process what she had just heard. She put the knife down carefully and turned to face John, her expression unreadable. "How long?" she asked quietly, her voice steady but with an edge of ice. "Several months," John admitted, his gaze fixed on the table. He felt a deep sense of shame, unable to look at the woman he had wronged. Mary stood up and walked to the window, staring out into the darkness. Her heart was pounding, a storm of emotions raging inside her. Betrayal, anger, sadness, all mingled together, but she kept her composure. She took deep breaths, forcing herself to remain calm. "Thank you for telling me," she said finally, her tone calm and measured. "I need some time to think." She left the kitchen, her steps measured and deliberate. John remained at the table, feeling utterly alone. He had expected an outburst, tears, something that would match the turmoil he felt inside. But Mary's calm reaction left him feeling even more unsettled. Mary's inner turmoil. Inside, Mary's emotions were a maelstrom. She walked to their bedroom, closing the door behind her, and sank onto the bed. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She felt a deep, searing pain, the kind that comes from being betrayed by someone you trusted completely. Her mind raced, replaying the last few months, looking for signs she might have missed. She thought about the nights John had come home late, the distant look in his eyes, the sudden interest in his appearance. It all made sense now, and that realization cut deep. She felt a surge of anger, a desire to lash out, to make John feel the same pain she was feeling. But she pushed those thoughts aside, knowing that acting in anger would only lead to more regret. Instead, she focused on what she needed to do next. She knew she needed to act, but she wanted her actions to be precise and measured, much like John's confession. Formulating a plan. Mary spent the next few days in a state of quiet contemplation. She went about her daily routine, but her mind was constantly working, formulating a plan. She was determined to take control of the situation, to ensure that John understood the full impact of his actions. She began by gathering information. She went through their finances, looking for any irregularities, any signs that John might have been spending money on his affair. She checked his phone records, his emails, anything that might give her a clearer picture of the extent of his betrayal. As she did this, she kept her emotions in check, focusing on the task at hand. She knew that letting her feelings get the better of her would only cloud her judgment. Instead, she approached the situation with a cold, clinical detachment, much like she would handle a difficult problem at work. John, for his part, tried to give Mary the space she needed. He stayed out of her way, avoiding any unnecessary interactions. He spent more time at work, trying to drown his guilt in projects and deadlines. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't escape the gnawing sense of dread that hung over him. Confrontation and decision. Finally, after a week of careful planning, Mary was ready. She called John into the living room one evening, her expression serious. John felt his heart skip a beat, knowing that the moment of reckoning had arrived. "John," Mary began, her voice calm but firm, "I've had some time to think, and I've made some decisions." John sat down, feeling a knot tighten in his stomach. "Okay," he said quietly, bracing himself for what was to come. "I want you to understand the full impact of what you've done," Mary said, her eyes locked onto his. "You've betrayed my trust, and that's not something I can easily forgive. But more than that, you've jeopardized everything we've built together." John felt a wave of guilt wash over him. "I know, Mary. I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking." Mary held up a hand to stop him. "I'm not interested in apologies right now, John. What I need is for you to understand that things cannot go back to the way they were. There are going to be consequences, and you need to be prepared for that." John nodded, feeling a sense of dread settle over him. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Mary took a deep breath. "First, we're going to separate for a while. I need space to figure out what I want and what our future might look like. You'll move into the guest room for now." John nodded, feeling a sense of relief that she wasn't asking him to leave entirely. "Okay, I can do that." "Second," Mary continued, "I want you to end your affair immediately. No contact, no explanations, just end it." John's heart sank. He knew this was coming, but hearing it said out loud made it feel more real. "I will," he promised, his voice heavy with resignation. And finally, Mary said, her tone softening slightly, "I want us to go to counseling. We need to figure out if there's anything left to salvage, and if there is, how we can rebuild." John looked at her, feeling a glimmer of hope. "I'll do whatever it takes, Mary. I love you, and I want to make this right." Mary nodded, her expression unreadable. "We'll see, John. We'll see." As John moved his belongings into the guest room that night, he felt a strange mix of emotions. There was a sense of relief that the truth was finally out, but also a deep sadness for the damage he had caused. He knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in months, he felt a glimmer of hope that they might be able to find their way back to each other. Part 5. Mary's Plan for Revenge. Formulating the plan. In the days that followed John's confession, Mary's calm exterior belied the turmoil within. She played the part of the understanding wife, giving John the space he needed, while inwardly plotting her next move. Her mind buzzed with plans and schemes, each more vindictive than the last. She was determined to make John feel the depth of her pain, to strip away the sense of security he had always relied upon. Mary spent hours meticulously planning, ensuring that her actions would be both devastating and untraceable. She knew that a direct confrontation would only lead to more conflict, and she wanted her revenge to be slow and methodical, a steady erosion of John's life, until he was left with nothing. Subtle undermining Mary began with subtle acts of revenge, aiming to unravel John's sense of security and self-worth. She started with his work, where he took the most pride. Using her connections in the community, she began to spread rumors about his reliability and professionalism. She reached out to acquaintances, planting seeds of doubt about John's capability to manage projects effectively. "Did you hear about that architect who messed up the Johnson project?" she would say casually during social gatherings. "Such a shame. He seemed so promising." The rumors spread like wildfire. Projects John had in the pipeline began to mysteriously fall through. Clients started questioning his decisions, and his colleagues became more distant. One evening, Mary sat with John at dinner, her face a mask of concern. "John, I heard from some colleagues today that there's been some trouble at work. Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice laced with genuine concern. John frowned, clearly distressed. "I don't know what's happening. It's like everything is falling apart all at once. I had 3 clients back out of projects today with no explanation." Mary's eyes gleamed with satisfaction, but she kept her expression neutral. "I'm sure it's just a rough patch. You'll get through it," she reassured him, patting his hand. "Maybe it's time to reevaluate some things, or perhaps even look into new opportunities." John nodded, though his expression remained troubled. "Yeah, maybe you're right. I'll figure it out." Straining relationships. Next, Mary turned her attention to John's social life. She began sowing seeds of discord among his friends, subtly driving wedges between them. At parties and gatherings, she would make offhand comments designed to cast John in a negative light. "John's been so stressed lately, he hardly has time for anyone," she would mention to a mutual friend. "I hope it doesn't affect his relationships. He's been so distant." The comments were always innocuous enough to avoid suspicion, but they planted doubts in the minds of those who heard them. Friends started inviting John to fewer events, and his social circle began to shrink. One evening, John returned home from a night out, looking more dejected than ever. "It's like everyone's avoiding me, Mary," he said, his voice tinged with frustration. "I went to the bar with the guys, and it felt like they didn't want me there." Mary feigned surprise. "I'm sure that's not true. Maybe they were just having an off night. You know how people can be." John sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I hope so. It just feels like everything's going wrong at once." Mary hid her satisfaction behind a sympathetic smile. "Don't worry, John. Things will get better. You just need to give it time." Financial sabotage. Mary's next move was to undermine John's financial stability. She discreetly funneled money from their joint accounts into a separate account that only she had access to. She also made small, unauthorized purchases on his credit cards, ensuring that the bills would add up quickly. "John, did you buy something from this website?" Mary asked one day, pointing to a charge on their credit card statement. John looked confused. "No, I didn't. Let me see that." He examined the statement, a frown deepening on his face. "This must be some kind of mistake. I'll call the bank and sort it out." The charges continued to appear, small enough to be overlooked initially, but frequent enough to create significant financial strain over time. John found himself constantly on the phone with the bank, disputing charges and trying to get to the bottom of the issue. "Another mistake?" Mary would ask, her voice dripping with feigned concern. "Maybe we should look into getting a new card or switching banks. This is getting ridiculous." John nodded, his frustration growing. "Yeah, maybe you're right. I don't know what's going on, but it's driving me crazy." Emotional manipulation. Mary also employed emotional manipulation to deepen John's sense of isolation and self-doubt. She would alternate between being overly supportive and subtly critical, keeping him off balance and unsure of her true feelings. "You're doing great, John," she would say one day, her voice full of encouragement. "I know things are tough right now, but you'll get through it." The next day, she would be more distant, her tone colder. "You need to get a handle on things, John. This can't go on forever. It's affecting both of us." John was left constantly second-guessing himself, unsure of where he stood with Mary. Her mixed signals kept him on edge, adding to the stress he was already under from work and financial pressures. The final blow. As the weeks went on, John became a shadow of his former self. The confident, successful architect was now a man plagued by self-doubt and insecurities. Mary watched him closely, waiting for the right moment to deliver the final blow. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, Mary broached the subject she had been carefully avoiding. "John, we need to talk about us." John looked up, a flicker of fear in his eyes. "What do you mean?" Mary took a deep breath, her expression serious. "I've been thinking a lot about our relationship, and I don't think I can continue like this. The trust between us is broken, and I don't know if we can ever repair it." John's face went pale. "Mary, please. I know I made a mistake, but I love you. I want to make things right." Mary shook her head, her voice firm. "It's not that simple, John. You've hurt me deeply, and I don't know if I can ever forgive you. I think it's best if we separate permanently." John was silent for a long moment, the reality of her words sinking in. "Is this really what you want?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mary nodded, her heart cold with resolve. "Yes, John. It's what I need to heal and move forward." John hung his head, defeated. "I understand. I'll start making arrangements." As John moved out of the house they had shared for years, Mary felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. She had achieved her revenge, but it had come at a great cost. The man she had once loved was now a broken shell, and their life together was in ruins. But as she watched him drive away, Mary felt a sense of closure. She had taken control of her life and ensured that John felt the full weight of his betrayal. Now she could begin to rebuild her own future, free from the shadows of the past. Part 6. Execution of the plan. Psychological manipulation. Mary's next move involved psychological manipulation, a tactic aimed at eroding John's confidence and sense of reality within the home. She began with small, almost imperceptible changes, knowing that a gradual approach would be most effective. Mary rearranged items in the house, moving keys, shifting papers, misplacing important documents, and then insisted that John had misplaced them himself. One morning, John frantically searched for his car keys. He was certain he had left them on the kitchen counter the previous night. "Mary, have you seen my keys?" he called out, frustration tinging his voice. Mary appeared in the doorway, her expression calm and slightly amused. "I think you left them on the coffee table," she suggested. John frowned. "No, I always put them on the counter. I was sure of it." Mary sighed, shaking her head with a sympathetic smile. "John, you've been so forgetful lately. Maybe you're just under too much stress." John retrieved the keys from the coffee table, his frustration mounting. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened, and it left him doubting his own memory. On another occasion, Mary accused him of forgetting to pick up the dry cleaning. "John, you forgot to pick up the dry cleaning again," she sighed, shaking her head in disappointment. John's face reddened with frustration. "I swear I didn't forget, Mary. Are you sure you told me?" Mary's smile was understanding, almost patronizing. "It's okay, John. We all make mistakes. Just try to remember next time." The constant questioning of his memory and reliability gnawed at John, making him second-guess himself at every turn. He began to feel as if he were losing his grip on reality, his confidence eroding bit by bit. Involving friends and family, Mary extended her web of manipulation to their social circle, ensuring that John's growing paranoia was mirrored by the concerns of those around him. She subtly hinted to friends and family that John was under immense stress and not coping well. "I'm just worried about John," she confided in a close friend during a coffee date. "He's been so forgetful and stressed lately, it's not like him at all." The friend's face showed immediate concern. "Oh no, that's terrible to hear. Is there anything we can do to help?" Mary shook her head, a sorrowful expression on her face. "Just be there for him. He needs all the support he can get." At social gatherings, Mary would make seemingly innocent comments that painted John in a less favorable light. During a dinner party, she casually mentioned, "John's been working so hard, but I think it's taking a toll on him. He's just not himself these days." Concerned glances and whispered conversations followed her statements, further isolating John from his support network. Friends and family began treating John with a mixture of sympathy and suspicion, their behavior adding to his growing sense of paranoia and self-doubt. John started to notice the change in how people interacted with him. Friends who once greeted him with warmth now seemed distant, their conversations tinged with pity. Family gatherings felt more strained, with relatives casting concerned looks in his direction. "Is everything okay, John?" his sister asked one evening, her voice full of concern. "You've seemed really stressed lately." John forced a smile. "I'm fine. Just a lot on my plate at work." His sister didn't look convinced. "Just take care of yourself, okay? We're all worried about you." These interactions left John feeling increasingly isolated and misunderstood. The combination of Mary's subtle manipulations and the concerned treatment from his social circle created a perfect storm of doubt and insecurity within him. Financial manipulation. Mary continued her campaign by deepening the financial strain on John. She discreetly funneled money from their joint accounts into a separate account that only she had access to. She also made small, unauthorized purchases on his credit cards, ensuring that the bills would add up quickly. "John, did you buy something from this website?" Mary asked one day, pointing to a charge on their credit card statement. John looked confused and increasingly frustrated. "No, I didn't. Let me see that." He examined the statement, a frown deepening on his face. "This must be some kind of mistake. I'll call the bank and sort it out." The charges continued to appear, small enough to be overlooked initially, but frequent enough to create significant financial strain over time. John found himself constantly on the phone with the bank, disputing charges and trying to get to the bottom of the issue. "Another mistake?" Mary would ask, her voice dripping with feigned concern. "Maybe we should look into getting a new card or switching banks. This is getting ridiculous." John nodded, his frustration growing. "Yeah, maybe you're right. I don't know what's going on, but it's driving me crazy." Emotional manipulation. Mary also employed emotional manipulation to deepen John's sense of isolation and self-doubt. She would alternate between being overly supportive and subtly critical, keeping him off balance and unsure of her true feelings. "You're doing great, John," she would say one day, her voice full of encouragement. "I know things are tough right now, but you'll get through it." The next day, she would be more distant, her tone colder. "You need to get a handle on things, John. This can't go on forever. It's affecting both of us." John was left constantly second-guessing himself, unsure of where he stood with Mary. Her mixed signals kept him on edge, adding to the stress he was already under from work and financial pressures. The final blow. As the weeks went on, John became a shadow of his former self. The confident, successful architect was now a man plagued by self-doubt and insecurities. Mary watched him closely, waiting for the right moment to deliver the final blow. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, Mary broached the subject she had been carefully avoiding. "John, we need to talk about us." John looked up, a flicker of fear in his eyes. "What do you mean?" Mary took a deep breath, her expression serious. "I've been thinking a lot about our relationship, and I don't think I can continue like this. The trust between us is broken, and I don't know if we can ever repair it." John's face went pale. "Mary, please. I know I made a mistake, but I love you. I want to make things right." Mary shook her head, her voice firm. "It's not that simple, John. You've hurt me deeply, and I don't know if I can ever forgive you. I think it's best if we separate permanently." John was silent for a long moment, the reality of her words sinking in. "Is this really what you want?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mary nodded, her heart cold with resolve. "Yes, John. It's what I need to heal and move forward." John hung his head, defeated. "I understand. I'll start making arrangements." As John moved out of the house they had shared for years, Mary felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. She had achieved her revenge, but it had come at a great cost. The man she had once loved was now a broken shell, and their life together was in ruins. But as she watched him drive away, Mary felt a sense of closure. She had taken control of her life and ensured that John felt the full weight of his betrayal. Now she could begin to rebuild her own future, free from the shadows of the past. Part 7. Climax. The culmination of revenge. Mary's carefully laid plans reached their peak one evening at a neighborhood party. She had discovered that John had taken Lisa to the same places he had once taken her, the same restaurants, the same weekend getaways. Her fury was like a fire that couldn't be quenched. During the party, Mary orchestrated a public confrontation. She had invited Lisa under the guise of needing some help with preparations. As the night wore on, Mary made her move. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, drawing everyone's attention, "I have a confession to make. My husband John has been having an affair with our neighbor, Lisa." The room fell into stunned silence. John's face turned ashen as he looked at Mary, betrayal and shock written all over his features. Lisa stood frozen, her face drained of color. "Mary, what are you doing?" John whispered, his voice shaking. "I'm telling the truth, John. Isn't that what you wanted?" Mary replied coldly. "You wanted to come clean, didn't you?" Confrontation. John turned to Lisa, his eyes pleading. "Lisa, I never meant for this to happen. I'm so sorry." Lisa shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know you were married, John. You lied to me." The neighbors watched the scene unfold, their expressions a mix of shock and sympathy. Mary stood tall, her eyes burning with a cold fire. "Now everyone knows the truth, John. This is the pain you've caused me.